How do you unlearn years of self doubt to finally step into who you're truly meant to be? Today, I'm joined by Chris, who shares his story of resilience from serving in the military to finding and embracing his true, authentic self in professional life. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Gay Grit, where I unpack the real struggles of being gay. Things like loneliness, shame, and rejection, and give you practical tools to help reframe them. So Chris, tell me a little bit about yourself and about your journey. You got a really interesting one.
Hey, David, first of all, thanks for inviting me and thanks for letting me come on and speak here. I appreciate it. I'm going to go way back, I guess, and start at the very, very beginning because I think it's important to leading, into the story about where I'm at now. So, like a lot of kids, probably, I was born in, a regular home with a married, mom and dad and a couple of brothers. But I was born in the middle of a cornfield in Ohio, of all places, and went to high school there, where my graduating class was, probably 180 people total. Um, and I was very different, even as a little kid, even in grade school. I think in the fifth grade, I won the dance contest because I did a Saturday Night Live rendition to the Star Wars theme that was very popular at the time. So you want to talk about dorky and gay? That was me at the time. So as a result, again, like a lot of people, probably, my father was very distant, but probably because he knew that I was gay and I was his eldest son. But my mother was doting. I mean, she kind of made up the difference, for what he didn't give me, she tried to give me. And of course, I was bullied in school, like most kids that age who present that way. Um, and yet, for me personally, I consider myself more bisexual than anything. I had girlfriends when I was old enough to have sex. I had sex with both men and, well, boys and girls, I guess, as the case may be. Um,
When you
and
were
it
a
was that
boy.
when I was a boy. Yes, when I was a boy. Uh, um, and in high school, I actually was with, my junior high school sweetheart was a girl, and I was with her more than I was with boys or men at the time than anything. And we actually were planning to, we she graduated early. We moved into an apartment together. We were planning on, having a future together. But she had some of her own issues and her own problems that she was dealing with at the time, having to do with religion and such that I won't go into. But on top of all of that, she ended up pregnant, and we talked about getting married. And she questioned, how would you raise us, or how would you support us? How would you afford to support us? At that time, I was still going to school and working, a restaurant job, and um, she said, well, why don't you go into the service? Why don't you go into the Navy? I had a friend whose, boyfriend did that, and they were able to support us that way. And I said, oh, okay. So that's what I did. I actually joined the Navy. Um, I did it for her at the time. And within a week of joining, by the way, I got my Dear John letter that said, I never really wanted to marry you. I just wanted to get rid of you.
Oh, ouch.
So looking back on all of that, I don't want to say it was one of the better things that happened to me, but it was probably what needed to happen to me um, at the time. And it allowed me, being outside of that cornfield in Ohio and on my own journey without family or known friends or anything else around me, completely in a new environment, to figure out who I actually was. And so 5 years of being in the Navy in the early, mid to late 80s um, was still a time when you could be pretty free outside of the Navy, right? Not within the Navy, obviously. And there was still a lot of openness and gay bars and dancing, and AIDS and HIV was just a thing that you heard about. It hadn't really taken hold yet. And so I was in California and in San Diego in training, and was able to spend my time there. Again, learning about who I was, and realized, you know, yes, I was probably bisexual, but I preferred men more than I preferred women. And so I dated a boy, a man at that time. And eventually, if you may remember, this was pre Don't Ask, Don't Tell timeline. So there were, homosexuality hunts in the service.
Oh, wow.
And if you were found out, you were dishonorably discharged. So
Mm.
it was always a question of, how careful, how free can you be? How careful do you have to be? And what and what can you do and what can't you do? And unfortunately, the boy that I was dating got caught up in one of those hunts.
Mm.
And, what they would do is they would force you to give up names of other people that you cohorted with. And no one actually talked about having sex with anyone, but they did talk about, oh, well, we went to a gay bar or we dated, things like that. And so he ended up giving my name. And although I was, honorably discharged about 6 months before I was supposed to get out anyway, um, it really crushed me. It really
Mm.
crushed me. It's hard to even talk about and think about now. But again, I had succeeded well in the Navy and I had moved up in rank quickly. And I had learned a great technical skill in electrical engineering that I didn't even realize what it meant, right? But again, getting out at that time was probably exactly what I needed to do. It wasn't what I planned to do, but that's what I needed to do.
Interesting. So I'm gonna go back because I'm very curious about this. So the hunts, like I mean, what? I guess I wasn't even aware that that was happening, but I don't really obviously know a lot about military life either. So, like, what did that like look like? Or did they just kind of did they call people in that they suspected? Did people like kind of like talent, what was it, talent or what's the word I want to say? Like narc on them
Tattle.
or whatever.
Yeah, no, yeah, basically. Yep. And so, I mean, you can, it's surprising actually, how gay you can be and get away with it. But I
Mm,
guess like anything, if there are people who feel strongly enough, you know, they'll turn you in. Most people, honestly, most people turn the other way. Most people turn a blind eye. Are you still bullied? Yes. Are you still called out as being gay? Yes. Um, but when you're at sea for 6 months with, 200 men on board ship, there's a lot happening that people don't talk about, and
mm,
and and people look the other way, and that's all I'll say about that. Um,
mm,
but the tattling and the narking is exactly what you said. It is, people who decide that they want to get rid of those types of people, or maybe you had a disagreement with someone, maybe they're just extremist in that way. Um, in my case, it was not anyone on my ship. It was someone that I had dated, and we had never even kissed. We had gone on 2 dates, um,
mm,
like to the movies and to dinner one time. That was it. I wasn't even dating him anymore. But they, however, he got caught up in it. I don't know, but they questioned him, and I don't know what they offered him, but generally they would offer people the difference between being honorably or dishonorably discharged. And an
mm,
honorable, obviously, you want that. You don't want a dishonorable discharge on your record because it can destroy so many other things. It's not
mm,
so much about getting or retaining benefits, because you don't really use them unless you're a true war veteran. But you can, right? Yeah, I could use them, but you wouldn't get those if you were dishonorably. So I think they use that as leverage. And he gave names of everybody that he knew may never have had sex with, as I said, but knew was gay, and I was one of
mm.
them.
And even today's context, I mean, you could just be two guy friends going to the movies or two guy friends going to a restaurant together. What is that?
Sure,
You
yeah, yeah,
know?
and again, like I said, that was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was a big deal because it supposedly protected us in a sense that we could still serve if that's what we wanted to do, as long as we didn't tell anyone, we could stay. And
Mhm.
that meant not admitting to your authenticity and who you were.
Mm,
The hunts all but stopped. They still happened in small ways here and there, but for the most part they stopped. And but again, now you were living in a state of denial and inauthenticity, which is a word that I just made up. So,
Inauthenticity?
yes,
I think that's a real word. Inauthenticity. It's hard to say.
you are not living your authentic life. Let's put it that way.
You're living your inauthentic life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Did any of that kind of play out? Like, I'm just trying to imagine like your headspace in that time, or anybody's headspace in the military who had to be concealed like that. And was there a degree of like underlying fear all the time, or paranoia, or were you just anxious, or did you just like kind of distance yourself from that and not think about it? Like, what was it like?
a little bit of both, I would say. Yes, you're always fearful. Yes, you're always anxious. Yes, you're always covering, hiding, who you really are. But I have lots of memories of times when, I didn't do that. And you forget and you do a little dance, you sing a little song, whatever it is that makes you shine in the gay way that you do. Of course I did that, and again, I think I had it better than most. I didn't have anyone on my ship that, there were a couple of bullies that picked on me, but I also knew that they were, you know, um, having fun when they wanted to have fun when we were at sea for a long time. So it wasn't like I knew that they were going to be doing anything against me. So I had it lucky. So the anxiety and the level of fear wasn't as high for me as it would have been for some folks, but of course it was there.
Yeah. Wow.
And when it did happen, it it kind of destroyed me at the time. Um, I had it's a cross between, hey, I'd been in for almost 6 years. I had 6 years, I was going to be in for 6 years. That was what my contract was. Um, and I was debating whether or not I wanted to stay in. But you don't make a lot of money in the service at all. So it
Yeah.
would have been better for me at that time having the equivalent of an electrical engineering degree to get out and go work for a company like GE repairing the systems that ships have.
Oh yeah.
I would make a lot more money that way. So I was debating between that and again, when it happened, it kind of destroyed me mentally. It was embarrassing. It was all the things that you can imagine that would happen when the world finds out your secret. Um,
Mhm.
but after I got through that, again, I realized that that was probably what I needed to do at the time. It was the kick in the ass that I needed to go to the next part of my life. And
Mm.
and that's what I did. And that's when I realized, what I had actually learned in the Navy. I was promoted faster than anybody else in my team. I became their leader on the onboard ship. Um, that that directly contributed to my success in the financial world and in corporate
Mm.
America later because I knew how to run a team. I knew how to work with different personalities. I
Mm.
knew how to organize work. I knew how to deal with disasters, because they train you on that type of thing in the service. So I think
Yeah.
I learned an immense amount. And then plus, like I said, I had the equivalent of an electrical engineering degree. So when I came out, I was able to transfer all of those directly into college and eventually get my own degree. And looking back, I had a great experience with it. I think it's a great thing to go through for people that
Hmm.
come from a background like me, and if some people that I know, including, my brothers who, one has passed away now from alcoholism, maybe if he'd gone that path, it would have been a different life for
Hmm. And so you're honorably discharged, even
him.
though you were found out. So
Mhm.
how did that work? What?
Well, it's a matter of them asking, have you ever had sex with a man, or have you not had sex with a man? And my
Oh.
answer was no, I've never had sex with a man.
And so then you could be honorably
Yeah.
discharged
That
versus
was
if
easy.
you had said you had it, you would be dishonorably
Yeah.
discharged.
Yep. You can say all the things like I went dancing at the club, I had dinner with a man, but that's the line that they draw. You can never have had sex with a man.
Mm, very interesting. And when did they implement Don't Ask, Don't Tell? That was like in
I
the
I
90s,
I,
wasn't it?
I want to say it was early 90s. Yeah, I don't have
Wow.
the date off the top of my head, but I do think it was early 90s.
I remember that one time that you and Matt and I were having dinner and we were talking about, just professional life, and I was kind of sharing some of the things that I was doing, to, worked through in my career and some of the challenges that I had, dealing with people, dealing with the corporate structure, dealing with the expectations, dealing with feedback and managers and things like that. And there was a bit of a journey there to work through my identity as a gay man, but also not assume that just because I'm gay or that I have trauma in my past or something like that, that kind of gives me a license to act however, and I should be getting a promotion no matter what because everybody else has it easier kind of thing. And we were kind of talking about some of these ideas, and I thought it'd be really great to talk a little bit about your perspective because I know that you've worked with a lot of, I think you've done some of those volunteer, the seminars and the workshops with, what was it, out and equal, right? Was it
Hmm.
out and
Yep.
equal?
Out and
So you've
equal.
had
Yep.
exposure to a lot of different types of, companies and people, and you've worked with diversity groups and things like that.
Yep.
Just tell me a little bit about more of your kind of your perspective, what you've seen, kind of some of the maybe challenges that maybe perhaps gay men in particular, maybe struggling with their identity, might be dealing with, and kind of how to maybe progress in their careers or
Mhm.
whatever. Floor is
Yeah.
open.
No. Well, you've hit on the most passionate subject for me now because as I said, I've been in this job, this job that I'm in now for 21 years now, I think. And I've been in the finance IT industry for over 30. Um, so the work is the work for me now. I run a large team. They do the work. I'm there to help clear blockers and plan and all of that, but I'm not actually building something. So I don't get as much, um, feel good about going home and that I've succeeded in something doing that kind of work. And somehow throughout my years here in this role, as you said, I've gotten involved in some of the business resource groups, we call them BRGs, that most companies have. And, they're for individualized groups. So there's a gay group, there's, a group for African Americans, there's an Asian group, there's a women in tech group, there's a bunch of different ones. And so I was one of the leaders took on a leadership role in the Pride Chicago version of the BRG, and then that led to a global role, and in several roles. And my point is that eventually that led me to be more involved in the aspect of career development, professional development, recruiting and retaining diverse technical talent for the company than it actually did my day job. So we call it, my day job is to build things and make computers go, right? But my gay job was to attract and retain diverse technical talent and then to grow those people in their
Mhm.
careers. And I fell in love with it. And I became very, very passionate about it. And in fact, I'm writing a few different books on this topic right now. And then when I retire soon, that's what I want my focus to be is
Mm.
teaching this information. So again, you've hit on a very passionate subject for me. Please shut me down if I begin to ramble too much about it, because I will.
I like it,
So,
the gay job and the day job.
yeah, so my gay job, yes. So, the importance, what I've learned is that all companies do this, but all companies do this differently. And your comment about understanding where you fit, like what is the expectation and why aren't I getting the performance eval and the bonus and the raise and the promotion that I'm due, right? Why aren't you giving me that? Why aren't you handing me that? I'm here to tell you that's not the way it works. It doesn't work that way anywhere in any company. It doesn't work that way in the Navy. It didn't work that way when I was a 14-year-old, serving up popcorn at the local theater. It doesn't work that way in corporate America. If you want a good performance review and you want a bonus and you want a raise and you want a promotion, you have to understand the structures and processes that those things are done within. And then you have to own that process and you have to go get those things. If you understand those and you write them down and you put them in people's faces and you walk that walk, right? Just don't talk the talk, you walk the walk. You do all those things. And then you have what I'll call icing on the cake. You stand so much of a better chance of getting those things, that promotion and that raise, etc. Than you do just waiting around for someone else to handed to you.
Why do you think people wait around?
You touched on this as well. I see this a lot. In having, part of my job is a large part of my job is recruiting. And we do work with a lot of undergrads, like Out for Undergrad and OSTEM type of organizations. And we go to college campuses, and I represent the company there. And there is a sense of entitlement that people have. And I don't pretend to understand where that comes from or why, but you kind of touched on it from a gay perspective, an LGBTQ plus perspective. Maybe sometimes we feel like we've had it rough, and so we deserve something better. And maybe it comes from that, but I, regardless of where it comes from, I see it consistently a lot, right? Um, and I have people who have been in their job for come out of college, get a technical job, and they're in their position for less than 2 years, and they're complaining at the end of the 2 years because they haven't been promoted to a senior position yet, and they don't even begin to understand the performance requirements of that role that they expect to be promoted into. They don't understand the functional objectives of their role that they're actually being paid to do. They don't understand the promotional process. They don't understand any of it, and yet they expect it to be handed to them. Now
Mhm.
imagine like, sorry, does that answer your question? Like,
Yeah, we'll explore it a little bit more because that's always such an interesting angle about
yeah,
entitlement.
yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but I do feel that people just expect it to be handed to them because they came in and did a job. They
Hmm.
did they didn't come in and do the job or all of the job. They didn't come in and do the the job of the role that they want to be promoted into. They just came in and they did what they were told, and they
Yeah.
have this expectation
Hmm.
that they're going to get a large raise, a big bonus, a promotion, great ratings for doing the minimum amount.
Right, right. I think about myself, because we talked a little about this a couple weeks ago when we were kind of planning this out, how I know I'm a very hard worker in terms of like I feel very conscientious of my job and my output. So I'm always very kind of precise and really feel like I need to always bring my best. And I think some of that comes from always having to overcompensate for myself for, trying to make up for what inside I felt about myself. So I needed to kind of I had to make sure that that flaw was overshadowed by how good I was. And maybe to agree, maybe some people feel that way too, where they need to kind of really overcompensate to cover over. And I think sometimes also if there is a sensitivity to that, there's these layers that we have. And so, the outer layer is what everybody sees. And then there's one that's just below it that's pretty safe for most people to see. But then as you get further and further deeper down, it's more sensitive and you got to really keep that more really super protected. And the moment that anyone touches that, it's like a trigger point where they just flare up or they could have like a reaction to it. They might be angry, they might be I guess act out or they'll do something. This is where they might slip up and get, called out by their manager or whatever because you've touched on it. And I know that I've um, had the situation where you know, you can also pick up bad habits too from managers. We talked about this too, where, I was also very impressionable, especially when I was younger. I was very impressionable to certain leaders that I was around. And I remember I was working for this one executive, and she was very powerful. And I felt like a little bit protected by her, but it also made me feel like I was, oh, what's the word? Kind of bratty. It just made me feel like, oh, I can do whatever I want to do, and I'm young, and I'm making money, and all this kind of thing. And because she was she was a good like effective at her job, but I felt that she had some bad habits too that passed on to me that made me feel like I can get away with stuff like that
Mhm.
as long as I had her protecting me. And so, and I've had a couple of other instances where I had managers that were, or coaches or whoever that were a little bit like that, where they were a leader. They just had mannerisms that were like off-putting. And I thought because they were successful, I could, I should probably adapt those as well. And so I take that into a regular, normal place where that doesn't fly, and then you can get really in trouble for that.
Right.
And I think sometimes, depending on where guys have come from, how they grew up, and maybe their family, if they've had abuse or if they've had trauma in their life, they might be picking up or kind of like a sponge to these types of behaviors where they just like manifest it. And so they don't really know what the boundaries are. You learn them in the military that there's certain things you can and cannot do, or you're going to be out. So, but if you don't have those boundaries, and I don't know where, I think it's sometimes maybe like, I don't think it's necessarily limited to gay people for sure, because I feel like the younger generation somehow is really struggling, with the sense of entitlement as well. But I don't know. I just thought I'd throw some of that all in there.
No, I agree. And I hear so much of myself in that and so much of my story as well in that. And I get angry. I have outbursts. I still have my own problems. And when I am challenged, when I feel challenged, as you said, like when I feel challenged in the things that I've built and the persona that I have built, and I feel that it is challenged, I react to that. And, you know, you turned me on to a book that I've been reading, and I'm going to forget the name of it right now. But in that book, they talk about um, the fact that we as gay men, and let's just talk about gay men, right? Because that's what we are and we know, we do learn to cover. We learn to distract and we learn to be fabulous at what we can because we don't fit the mold of what, other men and other boys and the things that our father necessarily wanted us to be. And so we build what we can, and maybe we are, the world's best chess player. Maybe we, become world famous singers. Maybe we focus on, you know, fashion design, whatever it is, we become those things. And in a way, yes, that becomes our persona, but it also becomes a cover. And
Mhm.
so when they're challenged, we react. And even today, like I still have that same cycle of reaction. Now, I don't think I learned that from a bad boss. I completely agree with you that those bosses do exist. Um, but I try not to be that bad boss. And
Mhm.
when I do have these challenges, the first thing I do is ask myself what I'm really mad about. And most times it comes back to I felt disparaged. I felt like I was being made to feel like I was less than myself, that the persona that I had built and the thing that I had built and the thing that I do wasn't good, wasn't right, etc. And that takes a lot of the heat away. That takes a lot of the anger away from me because now I know I'm not mad at the person. Maybe I lashed out at the person. Maybe I lashed out about the thing they said, but I'm really was upset about me. And
Mhm.
so that allows me to take a step back, take a breath, take it down. And then I immediately, step two, always go to that person or the situation or whatever and talk it out. I say, hey, I was having a bad day. Hey, I did this thing. Hey, I felt you made me feel this way. And you know what? It doesn't matter that, I'm a senior executive that has been at the company for 20 years. If I acted out in a meeting where I have associate level, you know, beginning employees that have been there for less than 2 years straight out of college. I don't want them to see that. I don't want them to think that. And so I do make a concerted effort to go speak with those people when and if that happens. Nobody's
Mhm.
perfect. But I think the key to it is feedback both ways, right?
Yeah.
I have to tell them how I felt and hopefully they'll tell me how they felt and together we'll build a better professional relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And feedback is, it's really necessary because it can actually help, you know, um, inform growth areas for you and maybe blind spots. I struggle with it, because a lot of times of this conscientiousness that I had, always already being aware of these things. And it's like, okay, I know you're not telling me anything new. Would you stop making me feel worse about it? Which is sometimes I would come at with that. Um, and that I know that going back into the entitlement thing, that it's really, again, it's that tender area. And I think also sometimes companies, unfortunately, systems can, not everybody understands how to give feedback either, which has always been a little
Yep.
point of frustration for me too, um, where I've learned to see things in people and how to kind of balance what I would say and things like that, and how to write it out if it's going to be written out or how to give it out verbally. But not everyone has that ability to do that. They just feel like, well, I saw this and now I'm just going to tell you about it, and
Right.
they're
Yeah.
not couching it anything that's going to make you feel like you're going to grow. You're going to make you feel bad and ashamed. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
that's
most,
the challenge.
yeah. And a lot of people that I coach actually, I just gave a talk this last quarter about feedback, how to give and get it. And what I found is a lot of people translate the word feedback into criticism. They
Hmm.
they only think it's a criticism. And so a girl was, telling me how this coworker continually criticized her on the work, and I'm like, but did she give you feedback or did she criticize you? Well, yeah, she wrote it up in the feedback form, but you're calling that criticism. Well, yeah, because that's what it is. You only give people feedback when you want to criticize what they've done. That's not exactly how it works, right? And then similar, when I asked her, have you ever given feedback, unsolicited feedback to someone? Or even solicited feedback. Has anyone ever asked you? And she said, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never criticize someone in how they do their job. So I think it goes back to first and foremost understanding that feedback is not a bad thing and that
Hmm.
feedback has to go both ways. And like you said, like we learn how to constructively provide that feedback most times in written form, right? We have systems that work and processes in place that, hey, get and give feedback, 360 review, right, et cetera, et cetera. But seldom do we learn to talk feedback.
Hmm.
And even less seldom do we learn to talk about how to engage in feedback without actually hitting the nail on the head. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? So
Yeah.
how do you get someone to understand that you're giving them feedback without actually saying, hey, I saw you doing that thing and it kind of sucked. So here's how you should do it, right? That's not constructive feedback, folks, right? Um, Instead, you might want to start with, hey, you know what? I was working on this thing and I had problems doing it because I was trying to do it this way. And I figured out that I was doing it wrong. And so I did it this way. Can you show me how you do it? Right? And then it becomes a conversation. Then you
Hmm.
start, oh, well, here's how you did it. Oh, here's how well I do it. Oh, well, that's better. And maybe that
Yeah.
other person will see that and learn from it. That's just like one way, right? There are hundreds of different ways, and there's a lot of books on this and mentoring that you can take on feedback. But I think first you have to understand feedback is not criticism. And second of all, you have to learn how to get and give
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah. It's part of a relationship, giving
It
and
is.
receiving.
It is.
And I'm struck with how in the corporate world where we spend almost all our time, or in jobs where we spend almost all our time, this is the only place where we really do it
Yeah.
because we have to do it. It's part of our job. But where it's really necessary is in every relationship where you have to
Yeah.
have that ability to communicate. And it's a very vulnerable position to be in, to give it, but also to receive it, to be the
Yeah.
person who has to kind of bear the news and then also has to receive it. And, I sadly in relationships, so many different relationships that I've been in, not even just like in being out or anything like that, but family relationships and friendships in college and things like that, where when there's someone feels that they've been wronged or they feel like they've been hurt by you or there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication, instead of working it out or instead of like communicating it, there's an immediate, you're dropped, you're cut off, you're gone, you're rejected, we don't talk to you anymore. And there's so many, like, it piles on top of each other where it
Yeah.
becomes like this thick callus that's on there,
Hmm.
and no one is able to even touch it. Where you're not surprised where that woman is like, you're going to criticize me, because it becomes like equated with that, which is really sad. I feel there needs to be a ability to talk and work through things out and communicate, because I think communication is so important, but it's an important part of like relationships.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to be one of those people that says like, oh, social media and all of those things has brought us to where we are. But
It has.
I do feel like I'll let you say it. Yes. I do feel like the idea of this whole cancel culture, gives us makes it easier for us to, as you said, drop someone when you get the thing that you didn't want to hear, or you get a little bit of
Mhm.
feedback or a little bit of stress in a situation or a relationship of any kind. So I don't like blaming like that's the reason, but I think it definitely contributes, no doubt. And you and I were talking before also about how in the past, generationally, our families were much closer. Like we had to talk on the phone, or we had to get together for the holidays. We had to get together for a dinner, right? It wasn't, you know, I follow my daughter on social media. It's one of the only reasons I stay on social media anymore is so that I can follow her and hear what she's doing, right? Because we don't even pick up the phone to make a phone call anymore. And if we do, no one answers because no one wants to talk on
No,
the phone,
right. I
right?
know.
So now attribute all of that to we had a misunderstanding, or you hurt my feelings. And instead of me saying to you, hey, I just want to let you know, like, you made me feel vulnerable. You made me feel hurt. You hurt my feelings because of this. And here's why, maybe, explain like this is why I felt that way. Instead of any of that, it is a lot of times an immediate flushed anger or just a block.
Hmm.
And just on my soapbox for a second here, like in the world that we're going into right now politically, um, and the things that we've seen happening in the world from a political perspective, we're not going to change that by canceling people or blocking
Right.
people. We're only going to change that by learning to listen and actually listen, even when what they say is ridiculously one-sided or completely opposite of what we believe.
Hmm.
We're never going to change anything if we don't figure out how to listen and
Hmm.
talk to each other and give and get that feedback. It's the same concept, right? It
Yeah.
is how do we build a bridge? And I hate using that term, but I mean, like how do we come to a common ground where we can all speak on terms that doesn't make us angry, that doesn't break our heart, that doesn't cause us to end our relationships with family and friends and loved ones and partners, you know?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier about that protective center that's in everyone, that the closer, the more we need to protect that spot that's really sensitive, the more, if someone gets really close to it and there it puts it into danger, like that's when that canceling happens, where that's where we need to push it out, because we can't like let anybody in there, because that's an exposure to us. That's a point of deep vulnerability.
Yep.
I've had to really kind of things that I've done, not even just with people of different political persuasions or religious persuasions, is just like challenge myself and train myself to be uncomfortable and sit in things
Mhm.
that are really, they might feel fearful to me. They might feel foreign. They might just be very like they could be threatening, where I've just been able to just kind of stay in that. And even in relationships, because we're in a small neighborhood in Chicago. You see people all the time, and so you always will run into people maybe that you had like a falling out with, or maybe that's someone that, in my case, I might have dated a while back and it just didn't end very well, or something like that. And you had to kind of like, you can't like throw something at them. You can't like splash a drink on them. I hate you. You have to like kind of be kind of civil in a way to like really like be okay with like the uncertainty of it, and just kind of move through that. And I've learned to do that even with political things as well,
Yeah.
where I don't really maybe agree with certain people. I won't necessarily like cancel them. I might unfollow them and like not have to just see their things or whatever, but
Yeah.
I still kind of try to focus on the things I do like about them and the things that I do find valuable about them, and not, I dial that up and I dial down the other so that I don't
Yes.
have to react to it.
Yes. And I think that's critical, right? I'm trying to like make a comparison between corporate life and day, our day life and our gay life, right? In that it kind of works the same, right?
Mhm.
We have to understand the frameworks in which we operate. We have to understand the processes. We have to understand how to interact with people and give feedback, and etc. It's the same in our gay life, right? In that neighborhood that we live in, that's the framework in which we have to operate. And we're all going to have those people in our life, and we're all going to have those situations that didn't end well. What it comes down to is how we let it control us and how we react to it afterwards, right?
Mhm.
And there are still people that, I don't talk to anymore. It's what happens.
Right.
But I think if we have that self-realization and that self, understanding again about who we are at our core and what we can do, what we can control, it helps to navigate that in a way that is less angry and less canceling. And when it does come down to those situations where, maybe it's not the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend that you're so worried about, but it is about being able to build a community of like-minded folks
Hmm.
where you can thrive and laugh and love, right? You have to learn how to deal with both the good and the bad of that.
Right. And I was really thinking about this too, because going back to what you had just mentioned about the family gatherings and things like that. Especially if you come from big families, like you came from a big family, and my dad had a big family and had lots of cousins and lots of aunts and uncles and all coming together. You always have in the family, the really brainy, smart people, and then the really kind of not so smart people, and then the ones that were super successful, the ones that are mediocre, the ones that are really struggling. You got all the different, ones without teeth and the ones that are just really perfect models. Literally they're all in my family. And
Yep.
like you have all of that, and yet they're still your family. And you still find ways of like, you still come together, you still share meals together, you do things, and you just play
Yep.
and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, that that's the nice thing about family. And I really wish that as a community we could find a way to be like that with each other, where, yeah, you're super successful, you're not like me, or you look like a model, I'm very plain, you are all these, whatever they are, whatever the comparisons that we make with each other, to not make those, it's easy to categorize them like, I want to be around people who are just like me. I feel more comfortable. Versus I'm going to be more diverse, and I'm going to bring everybody. I'm going to invite everybody in, figurative,
Mhm.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
They're going to be okay. And I feel then you can actually watch each other's backs, or you can maybe laugh about silly things, or you can kind of come along them and help them in something, not like take care of them, but like had that sense that you're together, because it's so isolating when you're not in a community, and when
Hmm.
you don't feel like you have anybody there, especially when you go into maybe an unknown political situation where it's like, you need to kind of rally together or whatever. But if you're all in your separate camps and you all
Yeah.
think the other person's you're better than the other person, it's the house divided, it's
Yeah.
gonna fall.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, exactly. But again, it goes back to putting all of that aside, in my opinion. Like you got to put that aside. And
Mhm.
there's bars and there used to be tea dances and you used to host some fabulous dinners, right? Um,
Yeah.
I love to throw a huge Christmas party. It's those things that I think we have
Hmm.
to look to, right? It's not always about, volunteering at the local community center. But I think from an emotional and cultural and community perspective, it's about building those relationships and friendships. We have to do a better job of that. And the first thing people say is, "Oh, I think you and I we do that at the gym. Do we do that at the bar? Maybe not as much as we used to. I know I don't go out that much. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think you do either. So it's things have changed, times have changed. We have the social media aspect of it that I think makes it a lot harder because that's what people go to. But we have to find the ways, and that's where I'm focusing right now. I have to find the ways that can allow me to build better relationships and better community where I can change hearts and minds for tomorrow, right? Rather
Mhm.
than just canceling someone or blocking them on social media
Yeah.
or crossing the street to avoid them.
Seriously. And it's so much better. And the fun thing, I believe, is, going back to we were talking about our bullying, being bullied in school. I was
Mhm.
bullied as well. And mm, not people do change. And so people grow up, they go through life, they have their own hardships, they have difficulties, and they may be in a different place than they were at that time where you in that particular hard situation with them in that bully situation or whatever. And it's being able to take that long view and be okay, be uncomfortable and explore it so you can actually invite them back in or be welcome so you don't have to cross the street.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. I think it's really helped me to again where I can focus in on what I like about the person or what they bring to the table or what I value about them, and I just turn that one part up, and the part that's really disconcerting to me, I just dial that one down,
Mm.
and then I can like be okay with it.
Yeah.
And this all or nothing thing is really a struggle, I think, for guys too, where
Yeah.
it's you got to be you're all this or you're all that.
Yeah.
Either you're my type or you're not my type, and
There's no in
it's so
between, right?
limiting.
But you hit something too, is that, the fact that, taking the long view and knowing that you've changed since then, right? Years ago, that person has changed then as well. They may
Hmm.
not be the bully that they used to be or the person that they used to be. So that's one way to look at it. But that leads me to, something that I try to remember is that we are all changing every single day. And that
Yes.
gives me a little bit of, room to allow others to be
Hmm.
to be what they need to be and not to judge and not to be so angry if I have to be.
Exactly. Exactly.
There has to be a middle ground, right? There has to be a gray. It's not all black and white, and
It's
we have
not.
to we have to listen and be that gray just as much as we want someone else to be.
Hmm.
Feedback. That sounds like feedback, like a feedback
I
topic.
know. I wonder how, I feel like this is such a good question to like ask people in the community. Like, how should we give feedback or how, yeah, I feel like there's just something we need to do to get people to be comfortable because I learn it's so interesting. I feel very privileged to get to know different people like you, other people that I've interviewed on the show, and I get a different perspective from people, but not everybody knows about each other's lives. They
Mhm.
just know what you see on the Facebook. They just know
Yeah.
if you work with them. They don't really see the inner workings that kind of make them, where you say, oh, I'm really like that person more than I thought I was like that person, right? We
Mhm.
have some things in common that I had no idea about. And
Yep.
that's another way of connecting with people.
Yeah. And for me, like, my way of getting out of my box is not necessarily going to the corner and standing up a community event, right? It is that mentorship and professional development and recruiting aspect that I've been able to get into from work, which allows me to travel to corporate events and to, recruiting events and to speak and be a part of that community. I meet so many people that way that are just amazing, amazing
Mhm.
stories. And it's just nice to be a part of that community. And we can't change the world overnight, like you and I individually. That's impossible, right? But together with others of like mind, right? We can,
Hmm.
and we can make it a happier place for us, you know, to
Absolutely.
live, work, and act. And so I try to focus on that and do what I can to help others in that way, but that gives me great satisfaction.
It does feel good. It's a really good feeling.
And if there's a way to bring that to the local community, then I should look at that as well. We should try to figure out how do you build a mentorship program for the gays in this neighborhood to be
Hmm.
both mentored and mentor, right?
Yeah. One of the I've heard this said before where we've lost because of the AIDS crisis a generation or whole uh, men who lived through a certain time that we could have learned from there were erased because of the AIDS crisis. And we
Mhm.
lost that connection to what was learned and how what it was like and had that that longevity or whatever, that long view.
Right.
And to be able to give back and to really help guys who are struggling. And I guess to agree, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to have like
Exactly.
something that's out there.
Yep.
Someone asked me yesterday about kind of why I'm doing this, and I had a whole bunch of long-winded answer, of course, and I knew a lot of it came back down to my friend who had taken his life. And the reason why I did dinner parties, because I wanted to bring people together because people are isolated, and I feel like there's got to be a better way to connect with one another. And no one really has a roadmap.
Mm-mm.
And it's different for everybody. It's very struggling. It's very hard, like your experience in the military, um, having to conceal and to hide and the hunts and all the different things that goes there. And then the bullying in high school and trying to figure it all out. And, it's really difficult. And I know a lot of guys are not out and they are not accepting of themselves. They deal with internalized homophobia. They don't like themselves very much. And how do you speak into all of that, especially when you can like make a difference to kind of show them something? If they can hear something from you or if they can hear something from me that gives them a sense of hope or identification that, oh, okay, it's not so bad, or they went through that, maybe I can do that, then
Yep.
that's a good thing. Because if I knew that if I knew because I like to learn and I would just go back and study a book and take a class or whatever, try to figure it out,
Right.
and
Right.
I overcome it. Not everybody has that ability. So
Right. Yep.
it's
Yep.
collecting these stories.
Yep. And I think what you're doing is wonderful in that regard. Like that's why I wanted to be a part of it, is that you are actually trying to, slice out something and show folks like, look, this is the problem. Like here's what I have seen. And I'm no therapist. I just play one on TV, but this is a great way for you to share that. And it goes back to community and being able to share those experiences, just like me trying to share, my experiences from a professional development perspective to get
Hmm.
people that promotion and that raise and the bonus that they want. It's the same type of thing. You're just dealing with it more emotionally. And so thank you for doing that. I think it's a great place to start. And I'm looking forward to helping it grow.
Good.